beneath the cold, dark waves of the Atlantic lies a secret the world was never meant to uncover. In 1945, as World War II neared its brutal end, Nazi submarine U-869 vanished. No distress call, no wreckage, no witnesses. For decades, history accepted the lie, but when a group of fearless divers stumbled upon its rusted corpse off the coast of New Jersey, they didn't just find a lost U-boat, they uncovered a mystery that would rewrite the past and haunt them forever. Are you ready to dive into the truth? In the final months of World War II, as empires crumbled and the world braced for peace built on ruins, one of Nazi Germany's deadliest weapons slipped beneath the waves and disappeared. No wreckage, no distress call, just a line in a war report and a story the world accepted without question. Until decades later, when a rusted giant, lying forgotten in the depths, forced history to reconsider what really happened to U-869. It was early 1945, and the Third Reich was in its death throes. Allied forces were pushing through Europe, cities lay in rubble, and the Atlantic remained one of the last battlegrounds. The ocean was a graveyard of ships and submarines where steel monsters hunted each other beneath crushing waves. Among them was U-869, a Type 1 C-40 U-boat, the pride of Nazi naval engineering, nearly 250 feet long with 6 torpedo tubes and a range that could take it across oceans. U-869 was built to be a predator. The Type 1 C-40 was larger, faster, and deadlier than its predecessors, the equivalent of a luxury sports car among submarines, but designed for destruction. The mission: disrupt Allied shipping, cut off supply lines, and strike terror where the enemy felt safest. That winter, U-869's orders placed it near the Strait of Gibraltar, a vital choke point teeming with Allied vessels. Its task was clear: hunt, kill, and survive. The central character wasn't a person, it was the submarine itself, U-869, the steel predator. Beneath its sleek design lay the hopes of a dying empire and the fates of 56 young sailors. These men were sons, brothers, and husbands, mostly in their late teens or early 20s, thrown into the chaos of war in a vessel designed to vanish beneath the waves and strike unseen. There was no celebrity captain, no heroics recorded in the logs. The men of U-869 were anonymous warriors in a war that had claimed millions, and like so many before them, they would soon become ghosts if they weren't already. U-869's final mission was marked not by glory, but by confusion and silence. Orders from Nazi command shifted as the situation on the ground and at sea deteriorated. On December 29, 1944, U-Boat Command initially directed U-869 to patrol off New Jersey, a daring assignment meant to bring the war to America's doorstep. But concerns about fuel led to a change. New orders redirected the submarine to the west of Gibraltar, excluding the strait itself. But the chaos of war left room for deadly miscommunication. U-869 never acknowledged these updated orders. The last message from the submarine came on January 10, 1945, a routine fuel report devoid of position or confirmation of the new patrol zone. Somewhere in the vast hostile Atlantic, U-869 sailed on, unaware of the conflicting commands and its uncertain fate. In February 1945, a United States Coast Guard cutter reported a sunken German submarine near Gibraltar. The Allies, eager for victories as the war neared its end, declared it a confirmed kill. Paperwork was filed. U-869 was marked as destroyed, off Gibraltar, case closed. No wreckage was recovered, no bodies found, no photographs confirmed the kill. But in the fog of war, details blurred, and the ocean with its endless depth and secrets kept its silence. For decades, the official story went unchallenged. Military historians logged U-869 as another casualty in the Battle of the Atlantic. The families of the 56 lost sailors grieved without graves, their sons' names carved into cold stone memorials, without the comfort of truth. No one, not the U.S. Navy, not German historians, not even those who mourned, had reason to doubt the reports. After all, who could question what the ocean had swallowed whole? And so U-869 became a ghost ship, a phantom of steel lost somewhere between myth and misplaced coordinates. But even as the world moved on, the Atlantic kept its secret. And in the years to come, that secret would rise from the deep, not through classified documents or military investigations, but through the obsessions of ordinary men who dared to ask what really happened. There was no resolution. The story of U-869 ended, or so it seemed, with a paragraph in a military report and a checkmark on an Allied victory list. The submarine, the crew, and the truth were left behind, buried beneath waves that had seen too much blood and steel. The world believed the story was finished. But history wasn't done with U-869. Decades later, off the coast of New Jersey, the sea would give up its secret. And what lay beneath those waves would force the world to rewrite a chapter of the war it thought it knew. Because sometimes the past refuses to stay buried. What if history's greatest secrets weren't uncovered by governments or grand expeditions, but by ordinary people chasing shadows beneath the sea? In the summer of 1991, off the coast of New Jersey, a group of wreck divers set out looking for adventure and stumbled into a mystery that would rewrite the story of a long-lost killer from the depths. It was a typical East Coast summer, hot, humid, the kind where the ocean calls to those looking for escape. Out on the Atlantic, the water stretched endlessly, its surface peaceful, betraying nothing of the chaos and wreckage hidden below. The Jersey coast had long been a graveyard for ships victims of storms, war, and human error. Beneath the waves lay the twisted remains of cargo vessels, fishing boats, and forgotten freighters. To most, it was just the bottom of the sea. But to wreck divers, it was a playground of history and danger. That summer, a small group of technical divers armed with little more than sonar courage and stubborn curiosity set out in search of undiscovered wrecks. Their boat was no government vessel, no grant-funded expedition. It was a weekend mission fueled by obsession. Leading the charge were John Chatterton and Richie Kohler, names now legendary in the world of wreck diving, but back then just two men addicted to the thrill of discovery. Chatterton, a Vietnam veteran turned commercial diver, was known for his meticulous planning and ice-cold focus under pressure. Kohler, charismatic and relentless, balanced Chatterton's precision with gut instinct and sheer determination. These weren't reckless thrill-seekers. They were explorers in the truest sense, willing to risk everything to uncover the truth. For them, the ocean wasn't just water. It was a vault of lost stories waiting to be unlocked. When their sonar picked up a long, sleek blip about 60 miles offshore at a depth of 230 feet, it wasn't the usual bulk of a cargo ship or the ragged outline of a fishing trawler. This was something different. The shape was narrow, streamlined, unmistakably a submarine. But that didn't make sense. According to every record map and expert they consulted, no German U-boat had ever been lost off the Jersey coast. History said there was nothing to find. But history was about to be challenged. Their first dive to the wreck was a nightmare. The Atlantic was unforgiving that day. The current tore at them like invisible hands. Visibility was almost zero, and the wreck itself loomed like a monster in the dark. It was cold, bone-chilling cold that seeped into their suits and their souls. The submarine was tangled in fishing nets, its metal hull warped and scarred by time. As they moved closer, the reality hit. This wasn't a freighter or a fishing boat. This was a U-boat, a relic of the deadliest war in human history, lying hidden where no one had ever thought to look. Dive after dive they returned, each time pushing deeper, risking more. They mapped the wreck, studied its features, and searched for anything that could tell them its name, its story. Slowly, the wreck began to give up its secrets. They found gauges labeled in German, dials marked in metric. And then the object that changed everything, a simple butter knife tarnished by decades under the sea, with a name etched into its handle, Horenberg. That name turned a ghost ship into a chapter of history that no one had read before. Back on the surface, Chatterton and Kohler dug into archives, naval records, anything they could get their hands on. That name, Horenberg, matched the crew list of U-869. It was undeniable. The wreck off New Jersey was the lost U-869, a submarine that official history placed thousands of miles away, destroyed near Gibraltar. The discovery didn't just challenge the records, it shattered them. How had U-869 ended up here? What had really happened? The divers had answered one question, but opened the door to dozens more. With the U-boat's identity confirmed, Chatterton and Kohler found themselves at the center of an unexpected storm. Historians debated. The Navy took notice. Documentarians called. But for the divers, it wasn't about fame. It was about truth. They had found the wreck. Now they had to find the answers locked inside it. The wreck of U-869 lay waiting, a steel tomb filled with clues, memories, and perhaps the key to one of World War II's last great mysteries. And John Chatterton and Richie Kohler were determined to unlock it no matter the cost. What they found inside would haunt them forever. Imagine stepping into a tomb sealed for half a century, untouched, silent, and frozen in time. When John Chatterton, Richie Kohler, and their team finally breached the inner sanctum of U-869, they weren't just exploring a wreck. They were walking through the final moments of 56 souls lost to history in a place where war, fear, and humanity still echoed in the cold steel. 230 feet below the surface, where light fades into total darkness, the wreck of U-869 lay like a forgotten monument. The ocean had done what no graveyard could, preserve the submarine as if it were waiting to tell its story. Inside, the water was icy, the pressure immense. The corridors were tight, the air long gone, replaced by silence and the weight of history. The submarine's interior was a world no one had seen since 1945, a steel coffin holding secrets only the dead could tell. There were no living voices here, but everywhere the divers turned, they found traces of the men who once called this place home. Bunks lined the walls, narrow, claustrophobic, barely big enough for a grown man. Some still held rotting bedrolls, reminders that this was once a place of rest, however restless. Personal items floated nearby, a rusted harmonica, a deck of playing cards, sealed in plastic, a pair of leather gloves. These weren't Nazi villains from textbooks. These were boys barely out of adolescence, trying to cling to moments of normalcy in the most abnormal of places. And everywhere the submarine itself, a character in its own right, loomed as both protector and executioner. As the divers moved deeper, the tension rose. The U-boat was no longer just a wreck. It was a puzzle with pieces scattered by war and time. Why was it here? What had gone so horribly wrong that 56 men died sealed in this steel tomb without a trace on the surface? The wreck was both a clue and a challenge. The divers knew that answers might lie in every rusted locker, every sealed hatch. But the deeper they went, the more they felt the weight of those unanswered questions and the responsibility to honor the dead. The submarine revealed itself slowly, like a reluctant witness. In the mess area, plates still sat on the tables as if the crew had been called away mid-meal. A ration tin, eerily intact, floated near the ceiling. It looked as if someone might return at any moment. In the control room, broken gauges clung stubbornly to the walls. Switches were frozen in place, untouched since the final commands were given. The divers imagined the last seconds, fingers flying over controls, voices shouting orders, fear rising as disaster closed in. In the torpedo room, they found something that sent chills deeper than the cold ever could. Several torpedo tubes were still sealed. No signs of an attack, no evidence of a defensive response. If they had been under assault, why hadn't they fired? Then came the most haunting discovery. The damage to the sub told a silent, terrible story. The hull was warped inward, as if the blast had come from within, not from above. Compartments were crumpled like soda cans, metal twisted by some catastrophic internal force. Could it have been a circle runner, one of their own torpedoes gone rogue, turning back on its masters? The theory chilled the divers to the core. To be undone by your own weapon, it was the ultimate tragedy. Everywhere they turned, reminders of life met signs of sudden, violent death. A cracked mirror reflected the beam of their dive lights, as if capturing the last glance of a sailor who never made it home. But there was no final answer, no neat resolution. The submarine remained a tomb and a mystery, refusing to give up all its secrets. For Chatterton, Kohler, and their team, the wreck was no longer just an exploration. It was a memorial, a place where 56 young men rested nameless and faceless no more. They had come searching for a wreck. They found a story, one that made the war personal, human, and heartbreakingly real. But one question remained, haunting every dive and every sleepless night afterward: what truly caused U-869's destruction? Was it a tragic twist of fate, or the final act of war delivered by an unseen enemy? To find out, the divers would have to look beyond the wreck into history records and the battlefield of ideas. Theories would clash. Evidence would conflict. And the truth. The truth might be as elusive as the submarine once was. What's more terrifying, an enemy you can see, or the weapon you unleash that turns against you? For decades, experts, divers, and historians have debated the fate of U-869. Was it sunk by American forces in the heat of battle, or did it fall victim to its own deadly cargo? The wreck lies silent, but the battle for the truth rages on. After the discovery of U-869 off New Jersey, the official story unraveled. For nearly half a century, records claimed U-869 had been sunk near Gibraltar by Allied forces. The wreck's true location shattered that narrative, leaving behind only questions. The debate spread from the cold waters of the Atlantic to conference rooms, history books, and dive shops. What really happened on that final patrol? Who or what delivered the fatal blow to U-869? The players in this mystery weren't just the 56 men aboard U-869. Now they included U.S. Navy veterans, naval historians, wreck divers like Chatterton and Kohler, and curious onlookers captivated by the puzzle. Some clung to the Navy's version that U.S. destroyers Howard D. Crowe and Coiner tracked and destroyed U-869 in February 1945. Others, including many divers and independent experts, believed a darker fate befell the submarine, one delivered not by the enemy, but by its own torpedo. Two theories emerged, each with its champions and its flaws. The Navy's claim. On February 11, 1945, sonar detected a submarine off the East Coast. Two destroyers launched depth charges, and after the war, the kill was credited as U-869. The divers' theory: U-869 fired a torpedo that malfunctioned, circled back, and struck the sub, a known hazard during WE. The evidence: the inward blast damaged the sealed torpedo tubes, the lack of signs of engagement from Allied forces. Both sides presented their case, but neither had the complete puzzle. The wreck, like the ocean, guarded its secrets well. Investigations deepened. Chatterton, Kohler, and their team documented the wreck meticulously, comparing every inch of damage to known patterns of torpedo strikes and depth charge impacts. Naval records from 1945 were revisited. The Navy's logs did describe a submarine engagement, but the coordinates didn't align perfectly with U-869's resting place. The depth charge attack might have destroyed a U-boat, but was it this one? At the same time, experts highlighted that circle runners, malfunctioning torpedoes that looped back toward the firing sub, were a grim reality of submarine warfare. Several U-boats were lost this way during the war. The wreck seemed to tell a story of destruction from within. Hull plates bent inward, compartments crushed like an imploding can. The torpedo tubes, still sealed, hinted at no final fight, no desperate attempt to strike back. The deeper they dug, the murkier the truth became. Some evidence supported the Navy's account. Parts of the wreck's outer hull bore marks that could match a nearby depth charge blast. But the damage wasn't consistent with a direct killing strike from above. The inward crumpling, the silent torpedo tubes, the lack of expelled weapons all pointed back to the terrifying possibility that U-869's doom came from within, that in their final moments, the crew fell victim to their own machinery. It was a theory that haunted even the most seasoned divers, a crew trapped powerless as their own weapon turned predator. Yet no single explanation could close the case. The U.S. Navy stood by its wartime claim. Divers and many historians lean toward the circle runner theory. In truth, U-869's fate likely combined both chaos, confusion, and the cruel fog of war. A sub rerouted without confirmation, a Navy attack that might have struck another U-boat, a torpedo gone rogue. The ocean kept its last word, as it always does. U-869 became more than a wreck. It became a reminder, a message from the deep that in war, the line between enemy fire and friendly disaster can blur in an instant. For Chatterton Kohler and everyone who touched this story, the journey wasn't about proving a theory. It was about honoring the truth, as much of it as the ocean would allow them to find. The wreck remains resting in its watery grave, a steel monument to questions that may never be fully answered. And yet it teaches us still, the ocean forgets nothing.